that whether this man, Mr. Hussain, was acting as an individual or was he pushing someone else's agenda, some political agenda. What would you like to say to that?
I mean, from what we've heard, it was an individual acting on his own. But I think we need to we need to ask. I'm sure he was convinced that he was doing the right thing, that he was striking a blow for the glory of the faith, for the greatness of the faith, etc. Now, why has this atmosphere come about? How has this atmosphere come to be so strongly entrenched in Pakistan? And why aren't we more cognizant about what we should do about it? I got several emails after this assassination, and all of them really praising this act. And when you have your religious party announcing a strike call over what is really a non-issue, but they managed to shut down the entire country.
Right.
Now that should give us pause for thought.
Right, absolutely. And also when rallies, Mr. Hafiz Saeed, when he just recently held a rally, or when he was condemning this act of blasphemy, many political leaders were not saying that they shouldn't have been present there, but many political leaders were in a way endorsing it. We had Mr. Chaudhry Shujaat Hussain, there was also Mr. Ijazul Haq who was present, where hate speech was being delivered. And of course there are a lot of impressionable minds. Now this gentleman is only 25 years of age, but a lot of impressionable minds are present at these rallies, and when especially political personalities are present there, it gives them more hype, and it gives sort of I would say more meaning to these rallies. Wouldn't you say that?
No, it does, but we have to question all this. We have to go a bit more deeply into this question. Over the last 3 or 4 decades, the influence of religion in our national life, in our political life, has grown. We haven't become a more Islamic society. We remain as sinful or whatever we were, as we always were. But the hype, the veneer, the hypocrisy in the name of religion, that has grown.
Absolutely.
And this has created a schizophrenic society.
Right.
We profess something else, we do something which is, I mean, quite far away from what we say.
Right.
And but what can be done about it?
Absolutely.
Now, the liberal elements of society sometimes, on the safe streets of our larger cities, they try to adopt a course of action which really leads to no meaningful results. This is a 30-40-year-old process which has brought us to this path. It requires a subtle approach. We can't, I mean, if anyone thinks that he can take on these things subtly, I think that politically would be very difficult, if not impossible.
Right.
So some thought has to go into the mechanics of how to reverse this process.
Right.
And the political or liberal elements, let's say, who think that this should be done, they should be strong enough, which they are not. Now, for example, the People's Party has been, this is the 3rd time the People's Party is in power. Why hasn't the People's Party done anything about it? I mean, you can condemn the other parties.
Absolutely. This is indeed a very important question, as Mr. Amir, you rightfully pointed out that religion has sort of created this schizophrenia. I'd like to take this question to Washington, to our guest. Raza, I'd like to ask our guest that, as Mr. Amir just pointed out, that religion has created schizophrenia. We haven't gotten more religious, but it's just the extremism that's creeping into our society. How do we separate the two, religion and extremism, which is of course breeding this war on terror as well, which is the reason behind this war on terror as well?
Ms. Qazi, why don't you take that? I mean, we see this dichotomy in Pakistan. I mean, there are religious elements, but then there are extremist elements. How do you take those two apart?
Well, I think Washington, first I'd like to add that Washington continues to be highly concerned over events like this. So this latest operation just makes it more clear that this is not only just a lone werewolf syndrome. I think that everything I've heard from my Pakistani guests that this was a one-person, one-time event. And when I deal with military personnel and even policymakers on this side, we see this as a web of alliances. So there's linkages between the religious elements. Sometimes you have a marriage between the extremists with the religious parties, and that creates even a greater concern. So a multifaceted problem requires a multidimensional solution. And I think that there's very little in this instance that Washington can do. The problem and the solution really lies inside Pakistan. So in terms of just on a counterterrorism perspective, what really needs to be done is the greater intelligence cooperation, greater intelligence sharing. Recently, just this week, I've been speaking with special agents with the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigations here, and they want to engender that trust with the Pakistani liaison forces. They want to be able to have that kind of relationship that's necessary to wage this war on terrorism, but they can't do that so long as there's distrust and disenchantment.
Right. I mean, you talk about the war on terrorism, but in this particular case, you know, our guests in Pakistan are saying maybe this was a lone wolf element. I mean, there is this element that, you know, of society that sees, doesn't see terrorism in the way, you know, let's say in the United States it's seen, as being a symptom of sort of religious extremism. I mean, the terrorism might sometimes be justified in their minds. How do you go about, as Maria was asking, how do you go about, you know, delinking the religious extremists from the terrorists?
Well, I think that I'd have to agree with the Pakistani experts that this is a problem that didn't just fester overnight. This is, I mean, a decades-long issue, and so you're going to have to be very careful on how you dissect the problem. One of the things that I deal with in my classroom is that we have to look at the perceptions and the stereotypes and the myths that exist. So while in Pakistan we don't, you know, the term terrorist isn't used, extremism is used, the word is miscreant, just as the way Margaret Thatcher in England would use the term, you know, criminals for the IRA. So yes, I mean, that alone creates this kind of, I don't want to get into a battle of semantics on it. The terminology is different. So the way that they are viewing this problem is absolutely very different than the way that we're viewing it. But I think we just have to be clear. What is Washington's interest in Pakistan? And it's very clear the mission, if you look at the objective, is a coin doctrine. It's a counterinsurgency doctrine. And so once you understand that, then you have to see, well, how can then you take that policy, which is very CT-centric, and marry that with what is Pakistan's interest to deflate the problem?